Make sure you clean that really, really well. And put a little bit of Loctite on it. That way you won't have any shock failure. This was full. Somebody dump this over real quick, please. We'll call it dust control. It's biodegradable. Also, if you look inside here, you also have a gun inside here, as well as here. You want to take those out and make sure that you clean them really well, get all the oil off them. And use I use a red Loctite because I don't ever want them to come off. Also, make sure that your shocks are straight. Sometimes you'll get a big hit, you'll either crack one, bend one, it'll go sideways. When you move your shock up and down, it should be smooth. There should be no binding. If it feels like it's binding, then relook at your piston, both your shocks. It's very simple. You don't want to ever hydro lock one of these because if you hydro lock it, it's either going to blow it apart or it's going to bend the shaft. If you're not sure, Losi also sells a larger bottle for you guys that use a lot of oil like I do. Make sure the bottom of all your shocks are tight. If your shock's fresh and new, always put a little oil on the O-ring before you rebuild it, just so you don't have any dry shafts on the O-ring itself so you don't tear it or twist it inside. Put a little bit in there, try to get it to the bottom, lubricate your O-rings. Fill it all the way up. But what I'll do is when I build a shock, I'll go through the cycles a few times and usually fill it up this high. You guys here see the bubbles? You want to get rid of all the bubbles. So if you rebuild a shock, set it aside, and then go on to your next shock. And when you build that shock, then go back to this one and check for bubbles. There's a couple of ways of doing this. You take a small tool, kind of tap on it, not thread apart, try to get the bubbles up to the top. And once you get all the bubbles out, fill it the rest of the way up, kind of like what I have here. Remember, you have remember Granite on the Losis, the diaphragm here? Just kind of snug it up. When you snug it up a little bit, back it off just a hair. Push it all the way down, you'll see the oil coming out the top. Snug it up. And when you push your shock should always bottom out. If your shock doesn't bottom out, what's happening is hydro locking. That's either going to blow a seal out or rubber O-ring or blow the bottom out of the shock or get the shock shaft. So I always build mine dead. That's how I like to fill up my shock on my car. And what I mean by dead is when you have rebound in your shock, you push it in, it's going to come back out. I build mine dead, so when you push it in, it stays in. And I'll do this a few times on the same shock. I'll just kind of like recycle it back and forth. This one's got a little bit of air in it because I kind of rush it a little bit. I'll cycle it a few times, and then I'll re-bleed it again. Because believe it or not, the shock oil does get warm. You guys ever run for 45 minutes, fill your shocks, the shocks actually get a little warm. And I'll do that a few times until I push it down and it stays. There's no rebound. And the shock should be pretty smooth. If you have an older shock that you haven't worked on for quite a while, I strongly recommend getting a shock kit. Both brands, all brands, MCD, Losi, HBI, they all build shock and build kits. If it's been a while since you've replaced your shock O-rings, please, just replace it. It's cheap enough to go ahead and replace. And then you just want both your shocks to be the same. So when you get done with one shock, set it aside like that, build your second shock, and then make sure that the rebound, the fill, is identical to both shocks. What happens a lot of times, guys will break a shock, and they will just fix that one shock, and you have one shock with new oil in it, you have one shock with old oil in it, the shocks are going to handle it completely different. So make sure when you replace one shock oil on one side, replace both sides. it's not so critical to do front and rear, but from side to side it is. Any questions on the Wilson shock? Okay.
What weights do you like to use in the front and rear on?
I'm going to answer this in a neutral response here. In the low-C shock, I run a 32.5 low-C oil. Stock is 30 weight, and I went to 32.5. It seems to work the best for me in low-C. I like a little bit stiffer damping. For the HBI vehicle, I would run 45 weight low-C oil all the way around with standard 2-hole pistons in the front and optional 3-hole pistons for the front and the rear. So there's a standard 2-hole that comes standard in the front of the shock. In the rear, in the front shock, there's also an optional 3-hole. I always put the optional 3-hole in the rear and run 45 weight all the way around. The HBI shock is a little bit different to build. You have to build it from the bottom.
So you said 2-hole in the front, 3-hole.
2-hole in the front, 3-hole in the 3-hole in the rear with 45 weight low oil all the way around. Now, if you guys do say you're running low oil and you go to your local hobby shop and you buy, say, brand H, brand B, whatever, and you go home and rebuild your shocks, you're going to notice that it's going to feel different. The reason why is because all oil companies have a little bit different things. I believe there's a difference between the associated and the low is like 50%. So if you start with low oil, stick with low oil. That way you always will be consistent. HBI shock is screwed from the bottom. As you can tell, there's some bleeder lines on the side. I don't have 45 weight with me. Let's try to do some 30 weight. I fill it all the way up to that line right there. Everybody knows the bottom of the threads is a line. I'll fill it all the way up to the bottom there. Okay? Then I'll push my shock in there, so gently. Now, if you guys are like Hercules and you want to like start pumping on it before it's sealed or the top's open, you will have shock oil in your hair, in your ceiling, in your face, your eyeballs. Cool, good for the skin. So make sure when you're stroking your shock, make sure that you go slowly and don't do it real quick because you'll blow oil off the top. I hit an O-ring right there. I'll back it off just a hair and I'll push it down. These are going to be a little bit harder to bleed. This is going to be really stiff because it's got the standard pistons in it. I'll stroke it a few times to get the shock oil kind of heated up a little bit. But you see, it kind of doesn't go down all the way. And that means it's hydro. So if you guys have shocks and you're constantly blowing the cartridges off the bottom of your shocks, it's probably because they're too full. As you can tell, I pushed it down, the oil came out. It's rebounded just a little bit. Probably need to bleed it a few more times. It might look like I'm being a little crucial, but I also want my car to be the best it can be at all times.
Is there an advantage to having that where we tighten up, the shock is dead, or it won't rebound out?
I just like the way the car feels. Some people some guys build it with a little bit of rebound in it. It's just the way they like to feel their car. I like to build them dead. That's just the way I've always. So when you build your other shock, you want to make sure that you do the same thing. Make sure when you push it down, make sure the shock rebounds the same. If it doesn't rebound the same, then start over and make sure they're right.
How far should they be rebounding out when you're?
Like I said, I like to rebuild mine dead. So when I push mine down, they stay in. They don't come out at all. When I rebuild mine on my race truck. So that's probably a little bit. I'll probably do a little bit more than that.
Hey, do you have any of those?
Any questions?
What does, if you put some different springs on there, does that change how you do your oil on the system?
No. He asked if I change the springs on my car, do I change the oil? No, I like the damping. I've always liked the damping pretty standard. Depends on, the only thing I might do is I might revise maybe a different spring or a little more tension or a little less tension on the track. Very rarely will I ever change oil damping in my shop.
What do you generally start with the spring?
On the HBI, I always ran stock black. On the Veloci, I'm running blues in the front and reds in the rear. The reds are a little bit stiffer than the stock one. And I like the way it feels. It stands up a little higher.
About the new orange one?
I have not tried those yet. There are some guys out here that have run in the orange springs and I like them a lot. Depends on your driving style. Also, when you do get done building your shocks and you put them on the car, make sure that your arms are free. If you're picking your arm up and it's standing there, you probably have a hinge pin or you have something binding. If you have something binding in your suspension, that's going to affect the way your shocks work. So make sure that your suspension is always nice and free. You don't want it too free where it's rattling around, but you want it to be free enough so it works without it binding. When you put your shocks on, a lot of guys will take it and they'll tighten everything down. If this doesn't move freely or the bottom doesn't move freely, it's also going to hurt your handling of your vehicle. I've noticed it on my 10-scale stuff lately that if you tighten it down too tight and it binds, it doesn't make the car work. It makes the car work worse. So, questions?
On the HPI shock, other than the bleeder passages on your lower piece, is there another reason that you fill them from the bottom? Is the top
Because you can't bleed it from the top.
Okay.
Now, Fast Eddie and I believe Fast Eddie makes a bleeder top set. You put those on, fill it full of oil, tighten it up, take the set screw out, push it all the way down, let all the oil out, and when it's down, tighten it back up. Never bleed a shock and then pull it back out and tighten it up because what you just did, you just sucked a bunch of air back into the shock. So you have to start over.
What's the maximum time you would put on oil and shocks before rebuilding?
If you're going to race, I would show up at the track. I do my practice. If it was a big race, I'd practice, rebuild them for the first qualifier. Then on the weekend, I'd run them for 2 or 3 rounds of qualifying, and then rebuild them for the main and then race them. If it's just I'm out bashing around, I'll run them until they blow up, and then I'll fix them again. The dunes, I'll run it until the thing's dead, and it won't run anymore. Any questions?
On the HPI, I think on the stock rear shocks it has like a 12-hole piston.
There's a 12 and a 16 hole.
Right, and you like the 3?
I like the 3 with the synthetic oil. There's a reason why I like the synthetic oil, is because you can buy it everywhere. You go to any hobby shop and they have it. Unless you're a Fiskell guru, you're not going to carry, no offense, but you're not going to carry the fork oil that they put in their kits.
And what advantage is the 3-hole over the
Well,
standard?
it's a bigger piston and it's a thicker oil. So if you look at the ball oil, it's like a motorcycle fork oil. It's a thinner oil, so you need a smaller piston. So the advantage of me using this synthetic oil is I feel along races it doesn't fade as far. It stands up more. It doesn't fade as quickly. And it's easier and available. I mean, you can go to any hobby shop and pick up some synthetic oil. I mean, if you had to get another brand, they would have something that would work in this size.
Yeah, but they both servo
This isn't a rebuild question, but could you talk about spring load and adjusting that?
Spring load on the cars, it all really depends on the track, the springs, and how you like the car to work. Some tracks are rough, so you want to raise the back of the car a little higher. I know on the HPI product, I always ran the rear of the car a little bit higher. On the low C, I'm running it more lower to the ground. It's just the way the car likes to be. The track like this, I did raise the back of my low up just a little bit because the bigger jumps and the ruts, which aren't that bad actually. Not here at all.